Hi Anna, tell us about your new book Untamed.
Well, Untamed is about a quite brilliant but very troubled Duke who follows a very blunt woman called Katherine to her home in the countryside. And he spends most of his time disguised as a woman wearing gorgeous Georgian dresses. And it's about the way those two come together.
Uh-huh. It doesn't sound like a very conventional, it's set in a Regency period. It doesn't sound very conventional, traditional Regency.
No, I would say it's not so traditional. I think the most obvious non-traditional element is that my hero wears a dress and looks absolutely fabulous doing so, of course, because he wouldn't be anything less. I think it's a book that's much more about a really intense personal connection than it is about, I think, what we associate with the kind of lighter comedy of manners sort of Regency.
Mm-hmm. Your heroine, Katherine, I loved her. She's strong, she's gutsy, she's unconventional. In many ways, I felt like it was her book.
I absolutely agree. I often call it the cross-dressing Duke, the book, just sort of for short, just to get across the concept of what it is. But I agree that actually I think it's really Katherine's book. And I think there's something about the way that he kind of slightly goes into the feminine sphere of their relationship and is really not confronted by doing that she can somehow go more into the masculine sphere and really take on the kind of heroic action of the book. And that's really her path through the book, is to sort of become that hero. And I just adore the way she does that. I think it's really, really great.
I love it too, the way, even though she lives for a large part of her life in the country, she's very switched on. She reads, she knows about politics, she's smarter and much more clued in than many, I think, of the perhaps more superficial ladies of that era.
Yeah, I think because she's not had to conform to a particular social type, she's really been free to explore what interests her and really follow that rather than following what she should. And she's also, because of the quite difficult circumstances she's had to deal with their family sort of losing all their money, she's really had to develop certain characteristics that come into play later on in a different way once she's sort of back in London in a different context. And I really enjoyed exploring that, sort of how one context forms her for the other.
The Duke. We have to talk about the Duke.
Darlington.
Hot. I loved him. I thought he reminded me of, if you were going to cast him in a movie, that character in a movie, I'd get Johnny Depp to play him. How about you?
I think actually when I was researching men in drag, because I was trying to just get a picture to myself, can they actually make a beautiful woman? I did find pictures of Johnny Depp in drag and he is absolutely beautiful. So I think that's a good choice. But for me, I always imagined him, if it was anyone, it was Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, with his very blue eyes and his very sort of passionate lips. And I've just lately realised as well with Ben Wishaw's amazing hair.
He's deceptive at first, isn't he? Because everybody thinks that he's the foppish Duke who's indulged and indulgent, decadent. But he also turns out to be a very astute person.
Yeah, it's a trope I really enjoy, a hero or heroine pretending to be more stupid than they are. I think it's very fun to sort of watch them run circles around people. And I think the path for Darlington is really to start seeing people as people and give himself some boundaries about what he will use people for and what he won't. And that for me was really interesting to explore with him. Just what he's prepared to sacrifice and what he isn't, and becoming a bit more invested emotionally in society and in other people.
I thought also that, as all, I guess, being set in the Regency period, it was also a story of class, of the absolute decadence of the rich, which I assume you loved and enjoyed writing, but also about the wretchedness of being poor at that time.
Yeah, there absolutely is quite a large class difference in the book. I would hesitate to say it's about class difference because I think that's such a large, complex thing. But I think, going back to what I said earlier about the two contexts, that's something that really interests me, and class is a very evocative way to explore that. If you have someone who lives in one context and someone who lives in a completely different context, and then bringing them together and putting them in each other's worlds, I think class is a really interesting way to do that. And also, one of the things that really attracts me about writing historical fiction is trying to evoke a sense from the character that they feel just as modern in their life as I feel in mine now. And so I think exploring different kinds of lifestyles can really, really allowed me to do that in some depth.
And it takes you there as well. I think it takes the reader there. By doing that, you really convey a spirit of what it was like to be alive then and to be either rich or poor.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, of course, it's impossible to know, which is what we're always striving for as historical writers, is to create a sense of it could be this.
I assume you've done a lot of reading. I assume you did a fair amount of research, and you've probably read quite a few. Have you read quite a few Regency romances?
Yes. I'd say when I started, that was the bulk of my research, was other Regency romances, which of course aren't always the most spot-on research tools, but definitely gave me enough of a sense of the period to write the book. And then as I sort of rewrote and redrafted it, I did a lot more research and had to actually change quite a few important plot points because I discovered they were completely unrealistic. But in the end, I think that made it a much stronger book, actually. Did
you finish up with a favourite Regency romance writer?
Oh, my tastes have really changed over the years I've been writing this book. I'd have to say at the moment the one I'm really excited about is Cecilia Grant, and I just I enjoyed her first book a lot, but her second book, A Gentleman Undone, just really was for me. And I think of all the writers I'm reading at the moment, she does evoke that sense of real people in a real time.
Great title.
Yeah.
Gentleman Undone.
Beautiful, isn't it?
I thought also that Untamed was also partly about the potency of childhood experiences and how they have the power over you almost for the rest of your life to change the way you respond to things and the kind of person you become.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think romance is a really great genre for exploring that because obviously the experiences that form you really come into play when you meet another person whose experiences have formed them and you try and make it work romantically. And I mean, the childhood experiences of both my hero and heroine are quite awful. And not having had any childhood trauma myself, again, I can't really say that that's what I'm writing about so much. But at the same time, I think quite a big childhood trauma in fiction really evokes a sense of an obstacle to romance that you can actually feel in real life from things that sound quite small, like maybe I'm not as good at intimacy as I thought, which wouldn't make a great fiction, but feels really large in real life. So I think big childhood experiences in fiction do evoke an actual lived experience of trying to meet someone else and trying to overcome who your life has sort of formed you to be.
You evoked a great sense of cruelty and cold-heartedness, particularly in relationship to, I guess, the Duke and his background. How did you manage to draw that?
Gosh, good question. Never having had people that are important to me be cold-hearted at me. I think it really came from him. It really had to be his particular kind of damage that he longed for closeness, and really because he'd never quite experienced it, but as such a naturally warm, affectionate, passionate person, and that all those qualities were kind of too much because he'd never just had a natural expression for them. So I think that really just came from the more I discovered his character and the more I kind of realised what that need was in him that scared most people away.
What was the experience of writing the book like, and how long did it take you?
So I started it 3.5 years ago, and I've been writing it quite solidly since then. And it's just, I'd say this will be the real learning curve of my life as a writer. From the first draft where people were speaking in all caps at each other and I had about 5 plots stuffed into the one book. All the way through to the draft I have now has been an amazing experience. And I had a year's mentorship with Valerie Parv, which I won through the Valerie Parv Award. And the book really transformed during that year. I think having someone whose opinion I could really believe, I guess, just tell me that, yes, keep going in this scary, mad direction you're taking it and just keep working on it. And so that really sort of formed it. And also I did the RMIT professional writing and editing course in that time. So that also taught me a lot about writing and about the book I was writing. So it's been a massive learning curve and a real joy to write it as well.
I have to say, as a reader, I kind of grew obsessed reading it. I wondered if you got obsessed with writing it.
Absolutely. That's a really good word for it, actually. And I think the more I developed the characters, because Katherine in particular, my heroine, in the first draft she was a real doormat, which is a bit hard to imagine now. But the more I developed them, the more they just absolutely drew me in and became so magical to me. Yeah, and I think that's a quality you really want in a romance, is that these two people just have to be just who they are. And it's a really magical quality to sort of be in as a writer.
Mm-hmm. Have you always wanted to be an author?
Absolutely, always. The first book I wrote was called Stella, and it's in a big A3 scrapbook at home. Still got it at my parents' house. And they moved to the country. There was no father in the picture, I'm not sure why. And she went to the pet shop to buy a horse, and they sold their car and had a cart instead. It's this great childhood fantasy that is quite hilarious to read. But funnily enough, I can still see some cadence of my writing in there that really still existed already back then. So yeah, it's been something I've just always wanted to do.
And I was wondering if you could describe yourself in 3 words.
I'd say I'm quite serious and a bit nerdy.
Yes.
Quite a bit nerdy. And engaged, I think.
Okay. Thanks, Anna. It's great.
Pleasure.